ability is. The top-downs are usually basically top-down, that's what it says. And the relational one is in between, and usually not very sustaining, but unless you put mechanism to sustain it. In other words, farmers have to be involved in it, digitalization and all that kind of thing. Next, please. So what are the key elements for scaling? I'm talking about scaling of technology and innovations. I'm not talking about extension methods so far. So scaling, you have to have sustained interventions and learning over time. It's not a 3-year project, a 5-year project, no. You have to have appropriate policies and institutional support continuously. So put in policy and put institutional system. 3, you have to have those technologies and innovations in place. You have to have human capital. If you don't have human capital, you can't sustain it. You have to expand, range, and strengthen capacity of scaling pathways. In other words, this is pathways all the way from research, agribusiness, financial services, extension workers, and the farmers. That's what they call it, extension pathways. You have to have continuous generation, dissemination, and access of appropriate technologies, knowledge, and information. Those are the ingredients that make scaling sustainable over a period of time. And let me not confuse you a little more, but these are the kind of drivers for scaling out. I've already talked about policy and organizational framework. Human capital, essential. Communication and management, knowledge management is very essential. Funding and funding mechanism. Let me go into this. Funding has to be sustained. That's one. In other words, don't have, let's say, 500 million today, and then tomorrow you are dropping it to 0. Then the next day you are increasing it to 200. It has to be sustained. Because farming is a continuous process. You don't need a drop. Advisory service is continuous. You have seen from seed to agronomy, harvesting, post-harvest, trading, and all those things. It's continuous if you follow the value chain. And then the funding arrangement is not sufficient to say that agriculture has been provided with hypothetically 500 billion shillings this year. You have to ask yourself, how is that money distributed? Is it only at the center? If only it's at the center, you have to give it 40%. How much of it goes to the districts, to the local government, and for what purpose? How much of it goes to the lower units, including farmers, to generate demand? It has to be structured. The funding arrangement has to be structured so that the resources go to where it is needed most, which is on the ground level. And of course, it has to be monitored rigorously and followed on what it is doing, what not doing. You have to form partnerships and collaboration at all levels. To say government is going to do it alone, that's not work, it doesn't work anymore. Partnership you form at the level, at the ground level. Partnership you form at sub-country level, at the district level, at regional level, at national level. And partnership means forming with private sector, with NGOs, with other institutions, doing scaling and extension. Partnership with the funding agencies and all that thing has to be done, and it has to be done. It has to be made a policy and a system put in place to allow for that kind of partnership. Yeah. And this now comes to methods and approaches and tools. And the most common method, which is good for scaling, is participatory approaches. And some of the tools I'll be presenting, like digital tools and so on and so forth. One of the things is you can't do scaling if what you are scaling doesn't create jobs and employment. They have to do that. It has to bring money in the pockets of the farmers, of the extension workers, and all the actors who do scaling. So these are the critical elements. Now going to the role of extension and advisory service in scaling. The areas that they provide services in is production, we know, post-production. But they have to do business planning and marketing, help in marketing. Not that they do it. They have to help in organizing farmers. Brokerage. Basically, brokerage is basically linking with markets, financial services, pricing, and so on and so forth. Advocacy. We have to help with the advocacy and, of course, in networking among the system. So these are some of the challenges in delivery of extension advisory services. We know it that there is an issue of enabling policy and institutional arrangements. We talk of pluralism. At times it remains as a policy, but no institutional arrangement to help incorporate private sector and involve them in delivery of services. There's poor coordination and islands of interventions. You find that there are pockets of interventions which are not good enough for scaling. And then there is a diversity of needs and knowledge by extension agents. In one agro area, is a different need and a different knowledge. In another one is a different need and a different. So there has to be a diversity of capacity, information, and knowledge supply the extension workers. I think yesterday I mentioned it. There's a problem of platforms for experiential learning. It used to be done at the center. It happens that probably this is the only forum for experiential learning for extension workers now. And all those who play a role in scaling technologies. I don't know whether there's any. Does anyone know of any other forum? What I know is when I was in government, there used to be an annual event for experiential learning, among others, which is no more. Without this, there's a problem. And then we know inadequate expert pool of capacities and systems. That's capacity is a problem. Capacity, capacity, capacity. And yes, in terms of numbers, but also skill set for extension workers. And then limited diversity of extension providers. You don't need agronomists only. You need people who can help with post-harvest. You need those who can help with partnership. You need facilitators. You need people who do brokerage. You need all kinds of skills. You need social workers to help in organizational issues and so on. It's no longer the system we are running now, the farming system, the value chain, the food systems. It's multi-dimensional in terms of skills requirement. And therefore, there is also limited resources and impact data. And they will all ask you, what is the impact of extension? So the problem is, if there's limited resources and capacity and human capital, so what impact will you have anyway? But you can say there's impact in Ethiopia. They have moved from a food deficit to a food exporter. The same thing is Rwanda, Malawi, some of those places. So there is of concept of delivery of extension, especially when the ratios move from some places 1 to 10,000, 1 to 800, for example, even 1 to 1,000. There's an impact. Okay, so I think that's it. So let's go. I'm gradually moving into our area where we are going to talk about, because I have to bring it broadly and then I can narrow it down. What we know is, in extension, there is no best fit. Different models and methods work differently, different places. That's what we know. So you can't say you are going to apply this model universally. You have to apply it based on situation. So let's say you are in Kenya, you go into a place which is where is very heavy agribusiness. In other words, there's commercial farming, and you say you are going to do a participatory approach. That doesn't work. So the different models work differently in different places. Yeah. So they have to be customized based on situation. But these are some of the broad categories. We have, as we know, there's public delivered, there's public-private partnership, and then there's a pluralistic extension model. Private-public partnership usually work with, I think BIDCO does that, isn't it? BIDCO. The BIDCO is an palm oil farm. And they are planted some palm oil and so on, and it's a sort of public-private partnership. That's one of them. Now, some pluralistic non-public categories. These are non-public categories. There's farmer cooperatives, there are NGOs, there are social enterprise. These ones provide services and generating revenue through sales of products or services. Then there's market-based. In others, these are input suppliers, companies, and so on. Then there are knowledge brokerage. And I think AgriConnect started as knowledge brokerage, and they are moving into a bigger model, which is called bundled business services. I think it provided it well. And then there is purely private sector who provide fee for services. Usually they provide fee, you have to pay, especially these are suited for emerging commercial farmers and so on, who usually don't need a full-time extension worker, and they bring them as and when is required. Move, please. Move, Sebo. Now, let me go to business models. Why do we use private sector? And we call them now business models. Because that's a new terminology, by the way. Instead of private sector delivery, it is a business model. And they usually move into bundled business model because you have to make money from a bundled service what you are providing. What we know is access to extension is very limited. Private sector is closer to farmers. Private sector play multiple roles along a whole value chain. Business motive, there's a business motive. And therefore, they have a higher awareness of new technologies, new varieties, pest control methods, and so on and so forth. Generally, they usually have generally higher educational level than the surrounding farmers and actors. That's one of the justifications. Move, please. Just flash all of them. These are some of the acronyms which are used in some mixed public-private. Like, we are aware of farmer field schools. This is mixed public-private. And then this is a Rwanda one, Tuhingire Muhinzi, extension model. Rwanda has been successful in getting very mixed models where there's private sector, and there are all kinds of extension models, farmer-led and so on, which is mixed up. And then recently there's innovation platforms, which is pushed by some institutions. Now let's go to purely business models with bundled services. There's a village agent model. Now they call it community agent model, which is at one time championed by AGRA. We have rural business development services. Can you move? It is VBA. This VM is a village agent model. And then all these are sort of acronyms, and some of them actually are more or less the same. Some use farmers, some use cooperatives, some use agro-dealers, and so on. There's village chain extension. Village chain extension really is about they follow the value chain and they pick the best points of who can provide services. And so these are just some of the elements of business bundle service providers. So I'll go into agro-food. This is just an example because these are the most widespread service providers, either formally or informally, but they do provide services. Quite frankly, they are probably the ones who do virtual service provision. They call them very frequently. Even when you want something to do with banana weevil and so on, you call them. Or you have this one. That one is no longer there. This one is the best one now. No, this is the one. If you have, those are the ones who now provide services. And they provide it to you instantly, and you go and look for it. So so why should we have them? Why? Again, limitations in public service provision. And actually in Africa, agri-food providers are almost everywhere. And public extension are very few or absent. They play multiple roles. They provide a lot of information in addition to input and new varieties. And they're usually in touch with researchers, actually. So they get updated information from them. So getting new technologies, new varieties, and so on and so forth. And again, they have generally high education level. And some of them actually employ agronomists as well, the bigger ones. And they have high potential to absorb new skills and knowledge to increase range of services and therefore increase incomes. Yes, please. But they need retooling because a typical agro dealer is really not an extensionist. But some do employ extensionists for themselves. And some of them retool themselves based on the issues at hand. So we need to support them in dissemination. How do you disseminate instead of receiving just calls? How do you do it? The technique of dissemination of technologies. Developing, how do you help farmers develop networks? And also retooling them they have to move a step further in organizing producers to form groups and associations and link farmers to markets. All these services, they have to help farmers do it. And in some of these things, they can get a fee out of it because we have seen them do so. Facilitate access to credit and financial resources, facilitate and enhance availability of quality farm inputs, developing platforms for knowledge sharing, knowledge acquisition and use of digital platforms, and some planning and monitoring skills. These are skills which they will need. And this will form part of their bundle services for a small fee, one way or another, especially if it is digitalized. Now let's move to the next. Now, one of the things in this kind of models and any model, you can't run away from ICT extension delivery. I don't know how many platforms I have, moreover, just on WhatsApp, on getting advice. Even where do I buy a seed, a variety? Where do I sell this? And so on. Where I live, actually, there's a platform for farmers who are workers in the city who have farms. And they sell their commodities, their chicken, their egg, and so on. The way they advertise, they don't advertise an egg anymore. They advertise a cooked egg. No? All kinds of things. And when they're advertising the meat, it is cooked meat, the best way, pilau and all that kind of thing. So they're advertising very well. So a digital platform is a must for extension. And extension, when we are talking about extension, we are talking about the whole chain, the group system, including banking sector, financial sector, marketing, and all that kind of service that is required. Includes research, academia, and all that kind of thing. Yeah, next. Yes, please. Move. So why do you have to digitalize? It increases your reach and accessibility. It enhances knowledge sharing. It is data-driven decision-making process, one of them. It is very cost-effective. You can get personalized advice if you want. It is real-time, it gets real-time update. It empowers women and youth and all those actors who need empowerment. You can easily scale it once the backbone has been set up. You can integrate it with very many services. I've talked of financial services. I've talked about marketing. I've talked about all the other value chain actors, aggregators, off-takers, and all very easily integratable. Yeah. So these are some examples of digital tools in extension that are now in play. There's digital advisory services, you can see them already. There's WhatsApp, SMS, and so on, e-extension platforms, and so on, mobile apps, online training and capacity building. I think we saw e-learning. Now, this one I put in red. That's the next frontier of digital service. Building a marketplace, which I'm going to talk about very briefly. But Nangaka, if he can talk a little more, he's our ICT expert here. This is the new frontier. And Uganda is one of the countries which we have already launched yesterday. The minister launched that project. And Uganda is one of the 5 countries in Africa where marketplace is going to start operating. This is basically a multifaceted platform in one place. So when I'm talking about a marketplace, I'll bring it later on. So let me just go through it. We have social media. These are really some of the things we know. Digital farmer profiling, it brings it on, online monitoring and evaluation. By the way, all these things I've mentioned there is now bundleable in digital marketplace by a click of your finger. Let's move on. These are some of the tools that is applicable. Mobile device, social media, mobile apps, e-learning platforms. This is more or less the same, but this is a lot more, including satellite imaging, artificial intelligence, online survey, digital payments. All of it can be bundled there. GIS information, and so on and so forth. Next. Now, digital platforms, the marketplace, you can't run away from artificial intelligence. So it will deploy artificial intelligence and machine learning in the process. So when we launch the marketplace, it will be enhanced with AI and machine learning. Why should we do it? Why should we have these 2 elements into it? Because it is more precise, efficient, effective, leading to improved agricultural productivity and sustainability. Some of the roles of AI and ML are predictive analytics, personalized recommendations. In other words, you can actually have your own, which gives you a personalized information on what you need. It will give you instant answer. Automated decision support system. It can give you crop disease detection, farm robotics, natural language processing, farm management software is there, weather forecasting, even soil analysis can give you some, especially where data is available. It gives you supply chain optimization. So in other words, it links you to all value chain systems. Move on. So this is, I think you bring all of it together. Innovation marketplace is really like you walk in a marketplace. Let's call it a big rural market. When you walk in a big rural market, you'll find sellers and buyers of goods, commodities, information, knowledge. You can go to the market and just come back with information. Do you know in that village, there was this, that. There was a very bad storm and so on and so forth. If you just want information of what is happening in that area. You know that they stole so-and-so's cows in that. And they got the thief in the market and so on and so forth. In other words, somebody can say, yeah, I saw that cow. You post that picture of a cow. And somebody will tell, we have seen it. It was slaughtered in such and such a place. So it's sort of a policing as well. Now, it is almost exactly like that. Okay? There are those who want to sell and those who want to buy. There are those who go and say, I want exactly this. You go and look for it. There are those who have not made up their mind. And they walk around and say, I think this is what I want. So it's really typically a marketplace. If a researcher wants a certain information, even if it is just data on XYZ, and post it there. If an academician wants certain information, post it there. If he's selling an e-learning material, we'll post it there. For extension workers, and so on, you can post it there. So e-learning will be there and so on and so forth. So you to go where you want to go. There will be financial service providers. Just click. Okay? And there's, of course, going to be monitoring tools and so on. So you're not going to run away from it. Let's say you have got the PDM money and you go and marry your first wife or second. It's going to catch you. Because the next thing is going to ask you, provide data on what you have bought. And constant information as you progress. So if you have bought a wife instead of a cow, you get caught because that information will be passed to the monitors and they come and find out. So all this saying is extremely critical, even for our own setting. Because yesterday I was interrogating on how the PDM money is working, and I'm not government, so I can say it is not the best example. So this would be a good tool for government, the big government, to work on, and the small governments to adhere to. So basically, there's what they call the supply side. These are technologies, approaches, methods, funds, grants, partners, knowledge, and all that kind of thing. You can go on and on and on. And you can build it and expand on the scope of what it can do as you move along. Then there are people who demand those services and technologies and inputs. So people want innovations and technologies. They want market data, the information on technologies, policy options, partnership building, financing, and all that kind of thing. It goes. This is really the farmers, or it can be extension workers and so on. And these are the middle people who use it. They're interested in networking, matchmaking, brokerage, who can standard regulations, incentives, subsidies, challenge funds, and so on. Crowdfunding platform will be there, and so on and so forth. So this is really what kind of the marketplace we are talking about. So I think that's end my presentation, but Daniel can give a little more on that, because we can't run away from this. This is where we are moving, and this is one of the mechanisms you can increase the range and reach of your messages. And you can incorporate, it is not specific for anybody, but it's for all who are interested in using that platform. So thank you very much.